Welcome back to Cine Recaps. Today, I'm going to break down a survival thriller film released in 2013 called The Colony. Warning, spoilers ahead. Watch carefully. Global warming devastates the planet, pushing humanity into a desperate race to find a solution. After years of intense research, scientists construct massive climate control towers designed to cool the Earth, and for a time, the plan succeeds. But decades later, these towers malfunction, triggering endless snowfall that eventually plunges the world into a full-scale ice age. To endure the catastrophe, the remaining survivors retreat underground into fortified bunkers known as colonies. Anticipating a future beyond the frozen wasteland, each colony stores vast supplies of seeds, hoping one day to rebuild life on the surface. Despite offering protection, the colonies struggle to manage disease and grow enough food to sustain their populations.
When the food ran out, most of the people in the world died.
In one such shelter, Colony 7, residents are governed by soldiers Briggs and Mason, who enforce a rigid set of rules. The two frequently clash, as Mason believes in harsh punishment to preserve public safety. One day, while repairing the colony's satellite, a resident named Sam witnesses Mason forcibly expelling a sick man named Hal and preparing to execute him. Hal has tested positive for the common cold, a disease feared after a previous outbreak killed nearly 20 people in a single week. Hal pleads for more time in quarantine, insisting he will recover, but Mason refuses to listen. Realizing he cannot change Mason's decision, Hal declares his right to choose his own fate and says he will walk alone into the frozen wilderness. Ignoring this, Mason shoots Hal dead. Deeply disturbing Sam. Later, Communications Officer Cooper alerts Briggs that Colony 5 has sent a distress signal, despite having checked in normally just a week earlier. Alarmed, Briggs calls an emergency meeting.
All colonists, please report to the main hall in 30 minutes.
Explains the situation and asks for 2 volunteers to accompany him to investigate. Sam steps forward.
I'll go.
Along with a teenage volunteer named Graydon. Before departing, Briggs places Sam's girlfriend, Kai, in charge of Colony 7, a decision that enrages Mason. As the meeting ends, a man named Dexter and his wife Elena suddenly begin sneezing, sending the colony into panic. The residents scatter in fear while Briggs and Mason escort the couple into quarantine. At dawn the following day, Briggs, Sam, and Graydon leave the colony and begin their journey. Along the way, they explain to Graydon how the world fell apart, point out the weather towers responsible for the disaster, and recount old stories of clear blue skies, warm sunlight, and fresh air. Things that now sound like myths.
The world froze a long time ago. So long ago that I can't remember the warmth of the sun.
After hours of trekking through brutal cold, they reach a crumbling bridge and cross it carefully. On the other side, they discover a frozen couple, dead in the open snow, and question why anyone would risk traveling alone in such deadly conditions. Pressing on, they later come across an abandoned helicopter and decide to spend the night there.
Cool for you to fly one of these things, huh?
That evening, as they bond, Sam shares his past, how he was separated from his family during a violent snowstorm as a child and survived only because Briggs found and rescued him. The next morning, the group sets out early and reaches Colony 5 by midday. Their relief quickly turns to fear when they spot a trail of blood leading toward the entrance.
Hey, what is this?
Graydon begs them to turn back, but the men continue, descending into the colony.
You know, maybe one of us should just stay topside, huh? We stick together. You're coming.
Inside, the sight is even more disturbing. The floors are soaked in blood. As they move deeper through the lifeless corridors, it becomes clear that something horrific has taken place within the bunker. Moments later, the trio hears loud pounding echoing through the corridors. Moving carefully toward the noise, they discover a sealed door. Sam manages to pick the lock, and when they step inside, they encounter a terrified, emaciated man named Leland. Panicked, he urges them to lock the door immediately behind them. Once inside, Leland shows them part of a recorded transmission sent from Colony 5. In the message, an excited man announces that he and his group successfully altered a weather tower, melted part of the ice, and uncovered fertile permafrost soil. He explains that although the area remains sunless, it is livable and offers help to anyone willing to come, asking only that they bring seeds to plant.
We now have soil. We have sun, but we have no seeds.
Leland then points out where the message originated and explains what happened next. According to Leland, a group of Colony 5 residents set out to search for the thaw. They never found the promised land. Worse, they were followed back to the colony by a pack of cannibals who slaughtered them all and fed on their bodies. After hearing this horrifying account, Briggs decides they need to take Leland back to Colony 7 and prepares to leave. Leland refuses, insisting on staying locked inside the room, convinced the cannibals are still nearby.
Please, sir. I'm going to stay here. Right here behind this door.
Acting on Briggs's orders, Graydon pulls Leland out, but the moment they reach the doorway, Leland breaks free, rushes back inside, and locks himself in again.
Locked himself back inside.
With no choice, the trio leaves him behind and continues searching the colony. They eventually reach the source of the banging noise and are utterly horrified. A cannibal is brutally dismembering human bodies, surrounded by others of its kind who feast on the remains before collapsing into exhausted sleep. Suddenly, one of the creatures notices the men and moves toward them. Sam fires, killing it instantly. The gunshot awakens the horde.
Gotta go, Sam.
At their leader's signal, the cannibals erupt into a frenzy and chase the trio through the corridors. Terrified, the men run for their lives, firing back as they flee. Briggs throws a grenade, triggering a massive explosion that briefly slows the attackers. In the chaos, Graydon becomes separated. He is viciously attacked before Briggs and Sam reach him and fight off the creatures. Despite their desperate efforts, Graydon is fatally wounded and dies. Devastated but with no time to grieve, the men are forced to flee again as more cannibals close in. Reaching a ladder, Briggs and Sam climb upward and detach it to prevent pursuit. Suddenly, a cannibal appears and lunges at Briggs. Drawing on his combat training, Briggs fights back and kills the attacker. Enraged, the cannibal leader lets out a furious scream. Briggs and Sam escape to the surface and use a stick of dynamite to destroy the tower shaft. The structure collapses. Wiping out Colony 5 entirely. After catching their breath, the two begin the long journey home, struggling to process what they've witnessed and what it means for humanity's future. Several hours later, they reach the abandoned helicopter and take shelter for the night. There, Briggs explains to a shaken Sam that starvation and desperation can reduce people to animals, recalling similar horrors he witnessed during past relief missions. At dawn, as they prepare to leave, they are horrified to discover that some cannibals survived the explosion. The creatures have followed their tracks through the snow and are closing in. Sam panics, fearing he will lead them straight back to Colony 7. Thinking quickly, Briggs comes up with a plan to lure the cannibals to the bridge and destroy them. The two sprint toward it, the creatures right behind them.
Come on!
Briggs sets a trap using dynamite, but soon they realize the fuse is burning out.
No! What? The fuse is out!
Determined to end the threat, Briggs makes a final decision. He turns back to relight the fuse, sacrificing himself in the process. The explosion kills Briggs along with many of the cannibals. Heartbroken, exhausted, and alone, Sam presses on and continues his journey back to Colony 7. Meanwhile, inside Colony 7, Mason drags the still ill Dexter and Elena into the freezing cold and coldly shoots Elena, claiming it's necessary to protect everyone else.
No more tests. No! Oh no! No!
As Dexter breaks down in hysteria, Kai arrives, holds Mason at gunpoint, and orders him to spare Dexter.
You know the test is yet the delay just puts us all at risk.
Drop your gun!
Minutes into the standoff, Kai notices an exhausted Sam approaching and rushes to help him. Using the distraction, Dexter escapes Mason's control, while Mason follows Kai, knocks her unconscious, and locks her away. Hours later, Sam wakes up in the colony infirmary and explains what happened to Briggs and Graydon. Mason then restrains Sam to the bed, declares a shift in command, and appoints himself the new leader of the colony. Sam shares everything he knows about the cannibals, warns they will soon attack, and urges Mason to work together so everyone can reach the thaw as quickly as possible. Dismissing it as stress-induced talk, Mason ignores the warning. Later, with help from a young boy, Sam frees himself and rushes to rescue Kai.
Sam!
Are you okay? Did he hit you?
I'm fine.
Sam then shows Kai the thaw on the satellite screens, and the couple gathers as many seeds as possible before rushing to warn the others to prepare for the journey ahead.
What are you doing, Sam?
We need to tell the others, and we need to get the hell out of here. Let's go!
However, the couple is soon held at gunpoint by Mason and his men. The standoff is interrupted when the cannibals reach Colony 7 and pound on the doors demanding entry. The residents attempt to defend themselves, but chaos erupts as the cannibals break in and begin killing many occupants. Mason is injured during the fight. As a small group of survivors, including Sam, Kai, and Mason, lock themselves inside a room,
We need to get the out of here!
Sam finds an escape route through a vent and leads the survivors through it. The wounded Mason stays behind and, as the cannibals enter, shoots a gas cylinder, triggering an explosion that kills many of them, except the leader who jumps into the vent and attacks Sam. While Kai and several survivors reach the surface safely, Sam fights the cannibal leader. After a brutal struggle, Sam decapitates his enemy. Sam then climbs through the vent to rejoin his girlfriend and the group. With the seeds in hand, they begin walking through the harsh, frozen wilderness toward the thaw. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.